Welcome, dear viewer. I hope you are having a wonderful night. Tonight, I'll be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. I hope you are warm and ready. Let's begin. On the third night, Jacob didn't come out of his room. I got the courage to bring it up to Mom. People don't sleep for this long, I said. She was cooking a casserole. The sixth one, this week. We were running out of fridge space for the leftovers, but she kept making more. I would watch her from the corner of the kitchen, her posture curved and her newly grayed hair hanging over the food. I walked over and tugged at her sleeve, but she didn't respond. She was slathering butter on the top crust. "Mom," I said, "did you hear me?" "He needs his strength," she said. "We can't be bothering him." Before I could say anything, Dad walked in. His eyes were red and swollen, but he was smiling. He had 3 cans of Coke in his hands. "I'm starving," he said. "I still have the taste of that horrible cafeteria food in my mouth." "You would think hospitals had good food for how much money they make," Mom said. "I know, right?" Dad said. He placed the Cokes on the counter. Mom didn't want us to go near Jacob's room, but I was getting worried. I peered out from the kitchen. His room hung at the end of the hallway like an abandoned lighthouse, the only sign of life being an eye. Yankees poster taped to his door. Near the ground, there was a small sliver of space to see if he had turned on his lights. It was still dark, as it had been for the last 3 days. I turned back to Mom. "Shouldn't we check on him?" I asked. "I don't know why places like Wendy's or Burger King don't put up little shops in hospitals," Dad went on. "I mean, you have hundreds of people who are stuck there for days on end. That's consistent business." "It's all politics," Mom said. "They sign these big contracts that are impossible to break." Right. That makes sense, right?" Dad was standing next to Mom now, his face inches from the casserole. "Ah," he said, "smells great." "Do you want some of the leftovers while this finishes in the oven?" she asked. "I think we still have some from yesterday. Wasn't the spinach and ricotta one good?" "Very good. Very, very good," he said. I couldn't stop eating it. "Jacob's going to devour these when he gets the appetite," Mom said. I turned back and took a step into the hallway. The distance between me and his room felt long and narrow, like a high wire. When I got away from the casserole smell, I hit a different smell. It reminded me of old gym socks. Even with Mom's array of candles and incense, I still smelled it. It cut through everything. The last time I saw Jacob, he was on the drive home from his treatment. His face was a pale green and his eyes kept rolling back. Mom said I had to keep talking to him to keep his focus. I told him about my friends from school and how they keep pranking the teacher by putting tacks on her chair. It wasn't true. I saw it on a TV show once, but I was running out of material. It didn't matter though. Jacob didn't even respond. All he did was cough. "Danny," Mom said, "why don't you heat up some of those leftovers? We're all craving that spinach and ricotta casserole." "I can't stop thinking about it," Dad said. "I was dreaming about it last night." I ignored them. I kept my focus on my brother's door. I didn't dream about the casserole like Dad. I kept having a different dream. My brother was running into my room and flicking my ear. It was a game we used to play. We would tiptoe up to the other's door, then wait for our moment. Then, the attacker ran in and got 1 or 2 good flicks before retreating. In my dream, though, Jacob would run in and flick me. But I wouldn't move. I just stood there. He would flick and laugh, then flick some more. Sometimes he would flick so hard that my ear flew off. "Earth to Danny," Dad said, snapping his fingers in my face. He was standing in front of me, blocking my view of Jacob's door. "Do you mind heating up 4 portions of the casserole in case Jacob wants some? We're going to eat that before this next casserole. because we want to make sure Jacob's able to try it because, in my opinion, it was definitely one of your mom's best. I looked up at him and held my eye contact. I couldn't say what I was thinking, so I wanted Dad to feel it. Maybe if I stared long enough, my feelings would translate. But Dad looked at me for only a moment, then away. In that brief connection, though, I saw something I didn't want to see. It was like staring down the tunnel of the world's deepest well. "Come on now," he said. He grabbed my shoulders and turned me around. "You're going to want to heat up each piece individually, because if you do them all at once, then you won't get even heat through the pieces. And you'll probably have a couple that are too hot and others that are too cold. And then Jacob won't get the full picture of how good these casseroles are." Dad let go of my shoulders and walked ahead of me, but I stayed in the hallway a moment longer. I turned to look at my brother's door one last time. I fantasized about walking up to it and going inside, but I was afraid Mom would yell at me. Besides, I never liked going in there. He had a puke bucket next to his bed, which always had pink splatters in it, and there were always clumps of hair on his pillows. Back before the last hospital visit, Mom would make me go in there and talk to him, but I always made up some excuse, like I had a cold and didn't want to get him sick. When I couldn't get out of it, I would stay in there for a few minutes and watch him try to breathe. I would tell him about some TV episode I saw, then run back to my room. I looked up. I thought I was walking back to the kitchen, but I was moving toward the door. I didn't want to, but I kept moving, like my limbs were controlled by a puppeteer. I put my hand on the doorknob. I turned. The gym sock smell filled my head like helium. Through the darkness, I could make out a sliver of my brother's face. The soft evening light fell on him. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. His arms were straight as rulers, and his fingers curled like a blooming rose. I walked to the side of his bed. Red spit fell off his lips. I flicked his ear. It was hard. I walked out and closed the door behind me. As I walked back, I seemed to forget what the inside of his room looked like. With the door closed, it could be anything. Jacob could be doing jumping jacks, reading comic books, or plotting his next ear flick attack. When I walked into the kitchen, I heated up 4 plates of spinach and ricotta casserole. When they were done, I wrapped Jacob's plate in aluminum foil and put it in the oven to keep it warm. Then Mom, Dad, and I sat in the dining room and ate in silence. My mom died quite suddenly and unexpectedly of a hospital infection about 4 months ago. But that, if you can believe it, wasn't the worst thing. Nor was the fact that her younger sister, my aunt, took up with Dad less than 2 months after her death. The worst was yet to come. It started on a dull evening. I just had supper with my aunt and Dad, barely tolerating her bright, friendly chatter about school. I went upstairs to my room as soon as I could to do my homework. I stared at my laptop screen, pretending to look at my assignment. But in reality, I was swimming in grief and missing Mom. I couldn't concentrate on anything since she died. I minimized the assignment tab and looked at the photo I used as the background. It was taken a few years ago. A happy family occasion, with my mom and aunt sitting side by side, yet unlike my dad next to Mom, and I was leaning against him. All of us were smiling. Mom had both her arms stretched out around her sister and her husband. The chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen began flashing. I was mildly surprised. It was an older app that no one really used anymore, and I had been meaning to delete it. And then I froze. Mom's little image blinked in the chat box, and then the words popped up. "Hello, Thelma." Fear gripped my throat. I knew it must be some hacking thing or stupid error, but I was paralyzed. I turned around and glanced at my bedroom door. It was closed, although the sounds of TV from the living room still came wafting in. Aunt Claudia had the TV on whenever she was downstairs, even if she was not watching it. "Don't be scared, Thelma. It's really me. I found a way to talk to you, my darling. precious child, I've been missing you so much. If this was a hacker's joke, it was the cruelest joke in the world. Against my will, tears began welling in my eyes, spilling out. Oh, my darling, please don't cry. It's okay. And it's no use crying anyway. I need you to save that energy. My fingers still stiff from fear. I managed to type out a response. Mom. What do you mean? Is that you real? I could sense her familiar frustration rushing back through the laptop. Same as when she felt I wasn't being smart or strong enough when she was alive. Of course, Thelma, it's me. And I've come back to tell you something important. I had my own important news to share. Did you know Aunt Claudia moved in last weekend? Yes, Thelma. I know, and this is what gave me the strength to come and tell you. Please be strong. I know you are a strong girl, and you can deal with this. I am sorry you have to. But you have to tell you, she can't have everything. My life, man, house, and child. A different kind of fear took over me. Mom, what do you mean? Thelma, I'm sorry to put this on you like this. I don't know what else to do. You have to know. Aunt Claudia murdered me. The bottom of my world gave way as I dropped into a dark hole of dread and fear. I felt as if I had known this all along, all through the past 4 months. Ever since that awful night when Aunt Claudia called from the hospital, where she worked, to talk to Dad, I just couldn't say it. Thelma, are you listening to me? If I had any doubts that the laptop chat was really my mom, those words dispelled them. I heard them in the exact voice she always used to say those very words to me. Yes, Mom, but how? She was at the hospital, you know. When I went in, she wasn't on my floor, but it was very easy for her to arrange for me to pick up an infection. Thelma. The door opened, and Aunt Claudia poked her head in. I gave a little scream and frantically minimized the chat box. Aunt Claudia stepped forward. Oh, honey. You look like you've seen a ghost. Wordlessly, I nodded. Aunt Claudia sighed. Thelma, sweetheart, I miss your mom too, but this moping isn't doing you any good. It's hurting your dad, you know. Do you want him to suffer more? I shrugged. I couldn't speak. I looked up at her. The light was odd on her face. She looked more like Mom than ever before, but also not. And these clothes. Thelma. She reached out and touched my black sleeve, and I flinched back as though she had hit me. She frowned, and for an instant, I thought she was actually going to slap me. But then she smiled and said, I know girls your age like to wear black all over. But what do you say? Me, and you have a trip to the mall, and I will pick you up some nice new gear. On me. Chimone, sweetheart. It will be so much fun. I shook my head furiously. Tears of rage, grief, and fear splatter out. Aunt Claudia began again. Oh, Thelma. But then she stopped and went quiet. I looked up at her face. She was pale and had a horrible expression. She was staring at my laptop. I followed her line of sight, turning around to look at my screen. The photo had changed. There was a new photo in the background, showing Mom seemingly asleep in a hospital bed and Aunt Claudia by her side, bent over her. Aunt Claudia seemed to jolt into life. Her face twisted into a terrible snarl. She screamed, Are you playing tricks on me? And she lunged towards me. I cringed back in my chair, raising my hands to defend myself against her onslaught. But before she could even touch me, a bolt of electricity sprang out of the laptop, hit her square in the chest, and she dropped dead to the floor. I shrieked in terror. Dad and I had to move from that town. Losing 2 wives in 4 months isn't a good look for anyone. Even though the police combed through our statements and the laptop and the electricity up and down, they eventually had to put it down to a freak accident, which happened when I asked my aunt for help to get my laptop working. Dad never remarried, and I never heard from Mom again. Last week, I was leaving a gas station when I felt a sharp pain in my side. The homeless man, who I had just denied change, was holding a small, dirty syringe. I remember staring at him in shock and disgust as I fell into a deep, unwilling sleep. Apparently, the man hadn't noticed the multiple witnesses when he attempted this attack. I was told that I was saved before he could do anything. All my blood tests came back fine, and I was given an antibiotic just in case. I was told he injected me with some sort of homebrewed sedative, and it might have some side effects as I process it out of my system. That night, I had horrible nightmares about the man and all sorts of fears. I woke with a splitting headache, a dull, throbbing pain, and a sharp pain coming in waves. My head was full of cotton. I turned on the light in my bathroom and tried taking my temperature. This task proved impossible as I couldn't focus on the numbers in front of me. Everything was fuzzy and dark. I drank some water, and I only then realized how dry my mouth was. I peeled my tongue from the roof of my mouth as I attempted to swallow the water, a feat I found nearly impossible. After choking down the first sips, my thirst became unquenchable. I drank from the tap for an uninterrupted 30 seconds. I sucked deep into the water until I physically couldn't. I had risen from the sink for a moment, wiping my head back down to puke it all out, or what I had assumed was most of it. Along with the surprising volume of fluid, there was black bile. It stayed separate from the water in the sink and danced near the edge of where the tap was still running. It had a strange, colorful shine in the light, similar to an oil slick. I returned to bed feeling hydrated, nauseous, and exhausted. The next morning, I peeled my face from my pillow, and looking around, I noticed the blood. A small crust of dried blood outlined where my face had been on the pillow. I felt my face gently and realized it was extremely painful. Touching my face felt like touching a giant pimple, inflamed and sensitive. As I approached my bathroom mirror again, I made two discoveries. One, I had open sores surrounding the left side of my mouth. Two, the rest of my face was fine. The source of the pain was my hands. The fingers were dark, swollen, and clubbed. The flesh is tender and painful. The cuticles of my nails seemed to retract. I gave my doctor a call, and he told me to come in later that afternoon. I cooked myself a simple omelet for breakfast. I found it extremely difficult, as my arms disobeyed me slightly, shaking and moving in ways I didn't want them to. Plating the meal, I turned to carry the plate to the table and was startled by a sudden sound of glass shattering. I looked around frantically for the source when I realized it was the plate. My hands were stiff and completely numb. The meal lay ruined on the floor. At this point, I decided to go to the emergency room. I had trouble navigating the stairs, and upon collapsing to the floor, my arms and legs were stiff and uncooperative. I decided to call an ambulance. At the hospital, I was immediately put on an IV drip, and they asked me a ton of questions. The doctors had discovered a series of small, porous lesions across my stomach. The sight made me sick. A tight pack of holes is surrounded by gray, dead flesh. These holes went deep too. I couldn't bear to look at them. I gently explored with my fingers and found that I couldn't feel them. I could only feel that dull pressure and no sensation. I was sitting anxiously, gripping my thighs, waiting for some answers. I was stressed and sickened, and feeling my own body change in such a way struck me with a hopeless kind of terror. That was when I felt it. A soft wetness and a slight pain. I looked at my hands on my thighs when I screamed. My thumbnail had pierced the thin, bloated skin of my thigh through my pants. I frantically struggled to pull down my pants, revealing that my legs were black and purple, covered in deep, pus-filled lesions. I couldn't feel any of it. I felt weak, but overall normal, and I was looking at my skin and flesh being destroyed. The doctors moved me to a clean room until everything was sorted out. They did all sorts of tests and took many samples. I was never scared of needles, but the long, thick needle they used to take fluid from my back was mortifying. I began writing this because I fear this disease will take me. I wanted to record a few thoughts, even if they are delusional. The man in the suit, before asking me for money and later attacking me, the homeless man was talking to a businessman for an extended period of time. As I approached, I remembered them both turning to stare at me. I only remembered seeing this man because I saw him again, looking through the window to my room. I pretended to be asleep and saw him just staring at me. What if this man had given him the syringe instead of the aforementioned spare change? I'm recording this via voice text as my arms no longer function properly. The nurse came in the morning and I woke with a start. I was swinging my arms wildly at her. I had no control as I watched my rotting hands claw at her. Eventually, the loose flesh on my arms sloughed off, exposing bare bone and muscle. The nurse showered in my putrefied flesh and vomited inside her clean suit. She left the room. I cried out in horror, shock, disgust, and sadness. I couldn't control the movement of my altered limbs. My arm bone was black, covered in dark, lean muscle and thick, tight sinew. No extraneous flesh remained on my long, bony clawed hand. The doctors had restrained me, and we both agreed it was in our best interest. All I could do was apologize. I felt my legs rubbing against the thick straps. I could feel the flesh deteriorating, giving way to my new limbs. The doctors came in to give me something new when my long black arm broke free, slashing through his suit, and I'm sure my bony claw didn't stop at his suit. They sedated me as they retrieved their colleague. When I woke, they told me the man I infected had progressed much faster, and this disease would soon kill me. Apparently, he requested to be killed. I was too weak for that. Because of my restraints, I can't see much, but I can see my exposed rib cage. Its form was dark and twisted. Sharp, black, bony growths all over my torso. My organs were shrunken and tight to my spinal cord. All the extra meat and organs have melted and rotted away. As my limbs smash against my restraints, I can feel my jaw loosening and new teeth growing in. A moment ago, I stood up, bringing the hospital bed with me. I feel lightheaded, and it's hard to focus. Nothing seems real anymore, and I can't remember anything about who I was. My new arms finally escaped their restraints, and I am free. I don't like to talk about what happened 15 years ago. I don't even like to think about the fact that on January 7th, 2008, Sarah Collins, a beloved member of the community, left home to run an errand and was then never seen again. It was a huge case back then. Everyone seemed to want to know what happened to her, but no one was more desperate for answers than I was. Sarah and I had been married for 5 years. I knew as soon as I met her that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. She had one of those smiles that just lit up a room. That's why it was so hard to believe that such a beautiful, successful woman had seemingly disappeared. They hadn't even recovered her body. 15 years later, and they still didn't have a shred of evidence. Not a tire track or even a fingerprint. Nothing. The police put out an appeal, but no one came forward. Somehow, not a single person had seen her. It was like she had just vanished without a trace. I think about Sarah a lot. I could never quite bring myself to take down the photos of her from around the house. Sarah's bright face still smiles down at me from every room. There's one photo of her from our wedding day that I really love. Looking at it is like looking straight at her. It captured her perfectly. 2 days ago, I found myself staring at it, really getting lost in the details. Her eyes, the way the corners of her mouth were lifting into a smile, and the small dimple on her left cheek. I was looking at it so intently that I almost didn't notice the phone ringing. It was the landline phone, which was odd as no one ever called me on the landline anymore. It was all mobiles nowadays. When I looked at the caller ID, it was an unknown number. I shrugged it off and picked it up anyway. It was probably just the bank calling to confirm something. The call took a moment to connect, but when it did, I heard a strange rustling sound on the other end of the line. Hello, I wasn't in the mood for any prank callers. Is anyone there? Hello? Daniel? Daniel, thank goodness I finally reached you. The voice on the other end of the line was a woman's voice, shaking and breathless. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there? When I heard her name, it was like my heart had stopped beating for a moment. Sarah, my Sarah. But that was impossible. Sarah had gone missing 15 years ago. Whoever this was, it was not my wife. I don't know who you are, but you're not Sarah, I hissed into the phone coldly. Stop calling this number. I had dealt with a lot of these calls, especially when Sarah first went missing. Artists, fraudsters, or anyone who wanted to manipulate a grieving husband. I knew none of them were my wives. No, Daniel, wait. You have to listen to me. It's me. Sarah, you have to believe me. She was sounding shrill and desperate now, even a little hysterical. The lengths that people go to in order to sell a lie are astonishing. Why are you doing this? I asked angrily. It's been 15 years since my wife disappeared. What do you want from me? For a moment, the woman on the other end of the line didn't respond. I was beginning to think that the call had disconnected when she finally spoke. Daniel, please, it's me. It's your wife. Sarah, the woman begged. I'm telling the truth. It's me, she continued to plead. But I'd had enough. I wasn't going to listen to this liar anymore. Don't call this number again, I firmly told her, hanging up. I thought that would do it. She wouldn't be likely to call me again. I assumed it was all over. The next day, I had asked a friend to help me repair my plumbing system. He was a good friend. I'd known him since college. He had been there for me when Sarah disappeared, getting me through it. We were both taking a break, catching up on the important events in each other's lives when my landline phone began to ring again. Sorry, I have to take this. It might be important, I said, getting up from my seat and making my way to the phone. I noticed that the call was coming from an unknown number, just as it had the day before. I didn't make a connection right away. After all, it could have just been the bank this time around. I picked up the phone and I heard the same rustling sound. It was unsettling in a strange way. I almost felt like I had heard it before. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Hello. I was already beginning to get a good idea of what this call was, and I wasn't happy about it. I told you not to call this number. Daniel, thank goodness. I finally reached you. The very same words that she had said the day before. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there? It was undoubtedly the same woman. I don't have the time for this, I hissed into the phone. I know you're not Sarah. Stop calling me. I hung up the call and walked back to my friend, who looked confused. Who was that? He asked me. I heard you say Sarah's name. Is everything okay? It was some prank caller, trying to pretend to be Sarah, I told him, rolling my eyes. I thought that I had left it all behind. I even changed my phone number. I don't know how this woman got hold of my new one. Pretending to be Sarah, my friend echoed. That's really strange. Did you tell anyone about it, like the police? No. I shake my head. There's no need. It's just someone trying to cause a bit of drama. They probably want money or something like that. I made it clear that that was the end of the conversation. I didn't want to continue talking about it, bringing up harmful reminders of the past. I woke up the next day, not expecting to get any more calls from the unknown number. I made it very clear that I wouldn't be participating in her charade. However, I was quickly proven wrong. As soon as I started to walk downstairs for a glass of water, the phone rang again. I thought about letting it ring, but I had a better idea. I was going to issue a much stronger warning to the caller, and even threaten to get the police involved if the calls wouldn't stop. That would scare her. I was certain of it. I picked up the phone, hearing the very same eerie rustling. I couldn't explain it, but it made a shiver run up my spine. Finally, the call connected. It was just the same as the other times. The same pathetic monologue. Daniel, 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 thank goodness I finally reached you. Maybe it was even a recorded message. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there? If you don't stop calling this number, I'll have no choice but to involve the police, I told the caller. This is harassment. If you want money, try conning someone else. Before I could even give the woman on the other line a chance to answer, I hung up the call. Hopefully, this would show her that she wouldn't be manipulating me. I could see right through her elaborate scam. I was sure that my warning would stop the calls from coming in. I was so sure of myself that when I was woken by a loud, persistent ringing sound the next morning, I didn't even think to connect it to the unknown number calls. I first assumed it was my alarm waking me up. But when I turned to look, I saw that the alarm hadn't gone off yet. That was when I reached the conclusion that it was the landline phone. I rushed down the stairs, wanting to tell the caller that I would be taking police action and wanting to catch the desperate scammer. Fortunately, I got down there in time and picked up the phone. Holding it to my ear, I heard that creepy rustling that I had become familiar with. It still made my heart beat faster, just for the few seconds until the call connected. Daniel, Daniel, thank goodness I finally reached you. The usual message of hysteria came through the phone. I was well used to hearing it by now. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there? I gave you a warning. I said that if you called again, I would be taking legal action. I spoke into the phone loudly so that whoever was on the other side would be sure to hear me. You've gone too far now. I have to do something about this. I waited for the woman to respond. Daniel, no, it's me. I'm not lying to you. I would never lie to you. Daniel, it's me. Sarah, your wife, it's me. I can't stand the high-pitched whine of her voice. You're not Sarah, I told her bitterly. I know you're not Sarah. I will be taking action. Goodbye. I hung up the call for the final time and placed the phone back. I know that woman wasn't Sarah. I know for a fact she wasn't. I know it because on January 7th, 2008, Sarah Collins, a beloved member of the community, was killed. And I was the one who killed her. Sarah was an incredibly beautiful woman. I couldn't believe my luck when she first started showing interest in me. I didn't exactly have a lot of experience when talking to women, and I was ecstatic that someone like Sarah had chosen someone like me. I loved her for every single second of our marriage. I loved her, even when I found out that she was cheating on me. I had accidentally stumbled across a string of romantic messages between Sarah and one of her coworkers. She was planning to leave me for him. Sarah. My Sarah was planning to leave me for him. I couldn't have that. She was so beautiful, so bright, and so full of life. I couldn't lose her. I just couldn't lose her. So I killed her. I didn't have to think about it for long. It was the only way that she would be mine. Only mine forever. If she was dead, she would never leave me. She would always be my Sarah. When the police arrived, I made up an elaborate lie that she had gone out to run an errand and never come home. That very same lie ended up on the headlines of the national news. I didn't know if I would even get away with it, but a year passed, and then another year, and then another. 15 years passed, and no one ever saw through me. I was about to walk back upstairs when I heard a small tapping at the window. Click, click. That was the sound of the window opening. And that's when I heard it. Rustling, right here in my own house. Rustling paralyzed me with fear and sent my mind into a state of panic. Then I heard her. Daniel. Daniel. Thank goodness I finally reached you. The voice was coming from inside the house now. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there?